one thing at a time. And oftentimes, the kids would think they already had it. They already knew what they were doing. And that's part of the reason you only give them one thing at a time. So they can get that down. So they can get that down perfect. Even the best of the best at the sport still practices the fundamentals. Even the very best of the best practices. And even the best of the best follows the instruction of their coach. We have that perfect coach, and Israel had that perfect coach in God to give them their instructions one day at a time. And God gave them Joshua to give them their instructions one day at a time. You notice as we look through here that Joshua didn't give them the whole plan. He only gave them one step at a time. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. Nor the people advance, march around the city with the armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord." When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carried 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing the trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time, some trumpets were sounding, but Joshua commanded the people, "Do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout." So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling at once. And the people returned to camp and spent the night there. After this first day, they completed the task that was given to them. And it wasn't everybody that was going around. It was just these few people that were going around. So many were still back at Gilgal, wondering what was going on, wondering how things were proceeding, and wondering what was going to happen by blowing trumpets around the city and walking quietly. That's one of the tough things for us, I found out, especially this summer, is for us to be quiet. Every single morning, all the way up until day 30, I had to ask everybody to be quiet more than once. And also had to ask them to look at me. Part of being quiet for the people of Israel was they were keeping their focus on God. They weren't distracted. Their attention wasn't on each other. Their attention wasn't on themselves. It was on what God was asking for them to do at that particular time. They weren't intimidating the people by yelling out war cries. As a matter of fact, they may have been heckled, kind of like how VeggieTales has it, with the French peas, making fun of them. You silly people. You're just walking around the wall. What good is that going to do? But that's part of our dedication. Part of our dedication is to follow what God tells us to do and to keep our focus on Him. To keep our focus where it belongs rather than away from Him. Joshua got up early the next morning and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the second day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. For 6 days they marched around the city with no more instructions from Joshua. Do as you did yesterday. Walk around in perfect silence, once around the city, blowing the ram's horns. Blowing the ram of a call to worship. Walk around this walled city. And it wasn't like each day they'd walk around and see a little crack in the wall, or they saw people cowering in fear. To them they saw nothing except for they were just doing what they were told to do. After 6 days, it could have gotten frustrating for them, wondering, what is this that we are doing out here? but they had to continue. Just like the Israelites, we have completed 6 weeks of our study. 6 weeks of our study, and God is still asking us to do what he wants us to do. And like the people of Israel, we don't have that nod to tell us what's going to happen. The people of Israel didn't know that the walls were going to come crumbling down. Joshua did. But he didn't tell anybody else. I think one good reason for that would be that if they knew, they might have started shouting their war cries ahead of time. They might have started trusting. They might have started believing it was something that they were going to do and take it away from God. I'm sure the people of Israel were just as surprised as the people inside of Jericho on that 7th day when the wall fell. But here we stand on the precipice, heading into that 7th day. We know that God has been asking us to do his good work. We have done his good work for this time. But many of the campers that have been coming to camp, we won't see it again for a long time. And we won't see that work of God that's going on in their lives. All we know is that we took it one step at a time, one day at a time, doing what God has asked us to do. And that's what God asks of you to every day, to any every day, to do as he asks you to do. To do as he asks you to do so that you may know that it's not you who is doing it, but that it is God who is doing it. So keep watch. Keep watch to see God's work.